They Cloned Tyrone is a downright wacky movie, and I mean that in the best way possible. It's like a roller coaster ride through a surreal amusement park, with John Boyega as the pilot, Teyonah Parris as the co-pilot, and Jamie Foxx as the wild and crazy conductor. If Foxx is driving, you know you're in for a hilarious adventure. I'd watch him read the phone book. In another awesome episode of Movie Madness, we will try to squeeze the deeper meaning out of this movie's choices, like the use of stereotypes of the African American society, while pointing out everything that made this movie the masterpiece that it is. Of course, we'll also be ripping into it, because this is Movie Madness, and we're a bunch of movie-loving meanies. So grab your afro combs and popcorn, and hit the like and subscribe button and prepare to get canceled. In the first scene, we see a guy selling CDs. He offers them to a lady coming out of a car. She walks past him, and later in the movie, the next time we see her is in the underground, in a government facility and on a bunch of missing persons posters. Later, towards the end, we see her reuniting with her family after all the occupants of the secret government facility are saved. But more of that in a bit. The majority of this movie is set in The Glen. We're not sure where in America The Glen is located, as the movie doesn't give us any clues in regard to this. Although we do know the movie was shot in Atlanta, Georgia. Here we meet Fontaine, a groovy, washed-up drug dealer trapped in a fashion blender set to disco meets in the future. In this fictional city, we see retro flip phones and other outdated collector's items like CDs, 70s fashion, and slang. However, we also see the characters casually chat about Obama and blockchain. I half expected them to start Snapchatting each other. While confusing, this can be seen as a homage to the era of Blaxploitation subgenre of the 1970s. The surrealism in this movie is kinda similar to the style used by Donald Glover and Hiro Murai in the hit FX show Atlanta. It also has slight Twilight Zone vibes. Fontaine is cruising around, and the next minute he's running over a drug dealer selling on his turf. After casually committing attempted murder, Fontaine goes to the store, buys a 40-ounce, goes home, and kicks back while watching a chicken commercial that is so delightfully offensive in its portrayal of African Americans. But don't get shocked now, it's about to get really inappropriate. Anyway, Fontaine realizes a pimp named Slick Charles is late on his payment, so he goes to pay him a visit. Enter a pimp named Slick Charles. Slick's over-the-top fashion sense, with flashy suits and accessories, is a sight to behold. His jargon, delivered with impeccable comedic timing, is a masterclass on creating laughter. He's a riot, that guy Jamie Foxx. Anyway, as Fontaine confronts Slick over late payments, Slick pays up and Fontaine exits the building. As Fontaine gets into his car to leave, he's ambushed and literally showered with bullets. But the real kicker? Fontaine respawns like something out of Fortnite. We see him go through his day the exact same way, except this time he witnesses a strange SUV pick up a bloody and disheveled man. When Fontaine later goes to get his money from Slick Charles, Charles is obviously shaken because he literally watched Fontaine get minced by bullets the night before. So yeah, a long conversation and two scenes where Slick Charles tries to convince Fontaine that he should be dead. Now we meet Yo-Yo, the professional. We'll just call her that because the kids might be watching. And here at Movie Madness, we care about the kids. Anyway, Yo-Yo leads them to the car she saw after she heard the shots that hit Fontaine. Coincidentally, it's the same car Fontaine saw picking up a bloody, disheveled man earlier that day. They waltz into the creepy house next to the SUV as if they're on a mission to win the Who Can Make the Worst Life Choices competition. Inside the spooky house, they stumble upon a creepy elevator that looks like it moonlights as the local ghost taxi. Then they descend into an even creepier chemistry lab. In the lab, Slick stumbles upon what he thinks is cocaine, and he tries it. This substance turns out to be very important to the story. It was actually Compound H, the government's attempt at turning the black residents of the Glen into a living mood ring, controlling their minds, putting it in fried chicken, hair oil, and even the music somehow. Anyway, things get tripped out when Fontaine sees yesterday's Fontaine on the slab. He goes through a roller coaster of emotions and goes on a mission to find out what's going on. However, when Fontaine storms the old creepy house, everything's all cleaned up, making it look like he was crazy and needed some water.
I think you might need some water.
This dude with the hand fan is hilarious. Definitely one of my favorite characters. I wish he had more lines. While at Yo-Yo's grandma's house, we see Slick Charles see a chicken commercial on TV and suggest the crew plans their next move around a table with food. I found this particularly interesting because I believe it's a subtle nod to consumerism and the power of advertising in the food industry. And in the next scene, we do see the trio talking over some chicken before Slick Charles realizes the entire restaurant is being hypnotized by the chicken. Also, it's worth mentioning that the fact that Slick Charles commented on the lack of food at Yo-Yo's grandmother's house, plus the fact that we don't see her, makes me suspect she, like Fontaine's mother, doesn't really exist. After cracking Frog's drunken Da Vinci Code, the trio head to the church. It turns out the government is also using the church to keep the people of the Glen hypnotized. This too is a nod to the deeply rooted influence of the church in the black community. The church seems to influence the community by telling them to be obedient and non-reactionary. The trio use the secret entry in the church and get the full scope of the conspiracy, even finding out that Fontaine and Slick Charles have potentially hundreds of other clones on standby, ready to replace them. As they exit, they come out to a club where it turns out people are also having their minds controlled by the music. This nod is not as subtle, though, as it's scientifically proven that music can alter emotions. Don't believe me? Pause the video right now and Google it. Also, remember when Lil Uzi at a concert said all his fans were going to hell with him?
Obviously, all y'all motherfuckers going to hell, right with me.
Only for the crowd to cheer on? It's easy to see why the government would use music to control the masses. Moral of the story? Stay away from music, chicken, and church. Anyway, the hypnotized partygoers chase our heroes out of the club where they meet the guy that played Jack Bauer on 24. He's a racist government worker that makes sure the operation stays running smoothly. He basically breaks down the entire conspiracy on how the entire town is one big government experiment. Oh, he also did give them the secret code to control the clones, which Fontaine uses at the end.
Olympia Black.
But we'll get to that later. Upon discovering the government's eyebrow-raising attempt to play puppeteer with the minds of the Glen's black residents, Fontaine transforms from neighborhood cool cat to determined problem solver. With a steely resolve and a glint of "I'm not letting this slide" in his eye, he devises a plan that would make even the most cautious of spies nod in approval. Armed with determination and a sprinkle of righteous indignation, Fontaine sets out to uncover the truth and put an end to this mind-bending government experiment, uniting the entire town, even working with his arch-nemesis, the guy who literally killed him at one point. Up until now, the writers have managed to skillfully blend mystery, comedy, and thrills into a cinematic concoction, while walking along cancel-worthy lines. Kudos to their storytelling wizardry for keeping us entertained, engaged, and wondering what surprise is lurking around the next plot twist. The biggest plot twist comes when we find out that the lead scientist behind the whole diabolical government scheme is the original older version of Fontaine. It's revealed that Fontaine's life story is as fictional as the Jussie Smollett story. But amidst the smoke and mirrors, there's one unshakable truth. The memory of his dearly departed little brother, who, as it turns out, was killed and left for dead by a white police officer. Fontaine figured he'd make black people more like white people rather than see them annihilated in a process he called assimilation. Older Fontaine's plan unfolds like a mind-bending game of chess, where the ultimate goal is to orchestrate a generational transformation from black to white. In his office, a visual timeline showcases this gradual metamorphosis, like a museum exhibiting future racial evolution. The raid on the facility goes off without a hitch, a finely choreographed dance of strategy and courage. If you count the multiple people that probably died and the mindless clones that now roam the streets. Yet, just when triumph seems secure, the narrative takes an unexpected turn. Fontaine appears to respawn complete with fresh tattoos and a different hairstyle. Judging by big palm trees, LA Lakers flag, and crypt blue flannel shirt, it looks like we're in Los Angeles. It's another Fontaine clone, along with the same routine, and on the TV we saw a news report of the Glen Lab raid. As a Fontaine clone appears on TV, we see a guy turn to the LA Fontaine clone and ask him, "Ain't that you, Tyrone?" As the credits roll on the captivating journey of They Cloned Tyrone, it becomes clear that the movie's impact reaches far beyond the screen. Immersing himself in the character, John Boyega discovered the power of staying curious, a lesson that transcends fiction and mirrors the very essence of the film itself.